He was humiliated and forced to leave the plane, but within minutes. The flight attendant, the one who had subjected him to this injustice, became entangled in a series of events no one could have predicted. What happened on that flight not only changed the lives of those involved, but also created a ripple effect across the entire aviation industry. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated. Mike, I need you in New York immediately. There's a major event we can't miss. You're representing the entire team, the voice on the other end said. Mike sighed quietly. He wasn't one to enjoy the attention that came with off-field events, but responsibility was something he always prioritized. The flight was booked in a rush. Mike's luggage was minimal: a small suitcase with a few clothes, his favorite baseball bat, and the Silver Strikers uniform, a reminder that he wasn't just a player, but a symbol of the entire team. The gray skies above hinted at an approaching storm as the taxi slowly pulled out of the crowded neighborhood, carrying Mike Carter toward Logan International Airport. An uneasy feeling crept into his chest. Although he was used to frequent travel, this time felt different. Perhaps it was because the trip came so suddenly, or maybe it was because the New York event was more important than he realized. Mike instinctively checked his bag again, a habit he had developed over the years. The compact suitcase held exactly what he needed: the neatly folded Silver Strikers uniform, his trusted baseball bat, and a few personal items. Mike firmly believed that preparation was the key to success, both in life and on the field. The car jolted slightly as the driver, an older man with a silver beard, glanced at Mike through the rearview mirror. "Are you Mike Carter?" "The baseball player." Mike offered a polite smile. "Yes, that's me. Thanks for recognizing me. My son's a huge fan of yours," the driver exclaimed. "He watched the championship game last year, and that home run you hit. Unforgettable." Mike nodded slightly, a small smile on his face. Compliments like these always filled him with gratitude, but today his mind was elsewhere. All he wanted was to make it to the airport on time. Just a few miles from the airport, traffic came to an abrupt halt. A minor accident up ahead had brought all movement to a standstill. Mike glanced at his watch anxiously. Time was running out, and he hated being late. The driver tried to maneuver through a smaller side road to save time, but the rain began pouring heavily, complicating things further. As they waited in the jam, Mike's phone buzzed with a call from his longtime agent, Tom Hendricks. "Mike, are you on your way to the airport yet? I just heard that the flight might be delayed due to the weather." Mike sighed softly. "I'm stuck in traffic right now, but don't worry, I'll make it in time." Tom reassured him. "Good, just stay calm. This time, you're not just representing the team, but the entire league. It's a big event." Finally, the taxi arrived at the airport. Mike quickly stepped out, paid the driver, and hurriedly pulled his suitcase into the terminal. The airport was busier than usual, with long lines at the check-in counters. Mike glanced at his watch. Just over an hour left before the flight was scheduled to take off. At the check-in counter, the staff immediately recognized him. "Oh, you're Mike Carter. Welcome to Logan International. Here's your ticket, C12A. Have a great flight." Mike thanked them and moved quickly toward the security checkpoint. He made sure to keep an eye on his prized baseball bat as it passed through the scanner. Waiting at the boarding gate, Mike noticed a few passengers glancing at him. Some hesitantly asked for photos, and he politely obliged. Still, the attention made him uncomfortable. Mike had never enjoyed being the center of attention, especially in mundane settings like this. When the boarding announcement was made, Mike stood up and joined the line. He handed his ticket to the flight attendant, but as he stepped through the doorway, he caught the gaze of a young female attendant in uniform who was looking at him with a hint of suspicion. Emma frowned slightly when she saw Mike in his baseball uniform. She tried to maintain a professional smile, but it was clear that his presence made her uneasy. In Emma's eyes, Mike wasn't just another passenger, he was a celebrity who could potentially cause trouble at any moment. Mike didn't notice her reaction. He stepped onto the plane with his usual confident demeanor. Though he didn't enjoy being the center of attention, he understood that fame often came with curious glances. Wearing his Silver Strikers baseball uniform, he instantly became the focus of the cabin. Some passengers recognized him, discreetly snapping photos or whispering to one another. Mike simply smiled, pulling his compact suitcase behind him as he made his way to his seat. Seat 12A, located by the window in the economy section, was his assigned spot. Mike placed his suitcase in the overhead compartment and settled into his seat, hoping to enjoy a moment of peace before the long flight. However, it didn't take long for him to realize that the attention from nearby passengers wasn't going away anytime soon. A young man seated nearby hesitated before speaking. "Excuse me, are you Mike Carter? I'm a huge fan. Could I get a picture with you?" Mike nodded politely. "Of course. Thank you for supporting the team." The man beamed as he snapped a quick photo, but his actions drew even more attention from others in the cabin. A group of children seated a few rows back began talking loudly, pointing toward Mike and creating a buzz of excitement that rippled through the cabin. At the front of the plane, flight attendant Emma Reeves observed the growing commotion with a concerned expression. She was accustomed to dealing with high-profile passengers, but this felt different. Mike, in his striking baseball uniform, seemed to throw off the balance of the cabin. The noise and activity around him made Emma uneasy. She turned to a colleague and whispered, "Who is that? Why are passengers flocking around him?" Her colleague smiled. "That's Mike Carter, the baseball star. Don't worry, he's just another passenger." But Emma's sense of unease didn't fade. She resolved to ensure everything on the flight remained under control, especially since the growing excitement around Mike could escalate. Meanwhile, Mike tried to reclaim some quiet. He pulled out his headphones and played some soft music to relax. Yet peace was short-lived. A middle-aged woman sitting in the aisle seat nearby glanced over at him with a displeased look. "Could you please sit still?" she said sharply. "Not everyone likes this kind of noise." Mike removed his headphones, surprised by her tone. "I'm sorry if I disturbed you, but I'm just sitting here." The woman huffed, turned her head away, but continued mumbling under her breath. Her remarks quickly reached Emma, who was already feeling uneasy. Emma approached Mike, maintaining a professional demeanor. "Sir, we need you to ensure that your luggage is properly stowed, and please keep quiet to avoid disturbing other passengers." Mike raised an eyebrow, feeling the unfairness of the situation. "My luggage is properly stowed, and I don't believe I've done anything to cause a disturbance." "We've received complaints," Emma replied, her voice calm but firm. The exchange began to draw the attention of nearby passengers, who looked on curiously. The middle-aged woman from earlier chimed in again, her voice loud enough to carry. "That's right, he's bothering us. Everyone here just wants a peaceful flight." Mike turned to her, doing his best to remain composed. I'm just sitting here. I don't understand why you find that troubling." Emma, meanwhile, felt the need to intervene further to keep the situation under control. She wasn't used to handling conflicts like this, but Mike's presence seemed to complicate everything. "Sir," Emma said, her tone softer but still measured, "we need to ensure this flight remains safe and comfortable. If you're experiencing any issues, please let us know, but I'd appreciate your cooperation." Mike leaned back in his seat, exhaling deeply. "I don't understand why everyone is reacting this way. I'm just a passenger, like anyone else." Emma walked back toward the front of the cabin, but her mind remained preoccupied. She couldn't shake the uneasy feeling about Mike, though she had no concrete reason to justify it. The attention he attracted and the noise surrounding him all contributed to her sense that this flight might run into trouble. This mindset caused her to continue keeping an eye on Mike from afar, a behavior she didn't realize was adding pressure on him. Meanwhile, Mike closed his eyes, trying to tune everything out. But he didn't know that these misunderstandings were just the beginning. He had unwittingly become the center of a conflict he had no part in creating. Mike tried to remain calm in his seat, but it was clear that the atmosphere around him was growing increasingly tense. The whispers and scrutinizing glances from other passengers made him uneasy. Every time he moved his hand to adjust his headphones or reach for his water bottle, murmurs arose, as if every action he took was being irrationally magnified. Emma Reeves, the flight attendant, couldn't shake the feeling that Mike might be a potential issue. She turned to the head of the cabin crew, Carla, and whispered, "Carla, I don't feel comfortable with that passenger. He's a famous baseball player, and his presence is already creating chaos in the cabin. I'm worried this could escalate once we're in the air." Carla glanced over at Mike, who was sitting quietly in his seat, but she couldn't ignore the unsettled expressions of some nearby passengers. Carla frowned. "Emma, I don't think we have a valid reason to suspect him. But if you truly feel the situation might spiral out of control, approach him again and try to resolve it diplomatically." Emma walked back toward Mike, this time with a more assertive demeanor. She stopped in front of his seat, leaned down slightly, and spoke in a low voice. "Sir, I need to have a serious conversation with you. We've received complaints from some passengers that you're causing a disturbance on this flight." Mike raised an eyebrow, his frustration evident. "What did I do wrong? I'm just sitting here like any other passenger. If others feel bothered, that's not my fault." Emma maintained a firm gaze. "You may not feel like you've done anything wrong, but it's my responsibility to ensure this flight is safe and comfortable for everyone. If you're unable to cooperate, we may have to consider other measures." "Other measures," Mike repeated, his voice lowering. "What do you mean?" "I just want to sit here quietly and get through this flight." By now, the tension had drawn more attention from surrounding passengers. An older man spoke up, his tone frustrated. "This is ridiculous. He hasn't done anything wrong. Just leave him alone." The middle-aged woman from earlier, however, wasn't ready to let it go. She interjected, "He has an arrogant attitude. Just because he's famous doesn't mean he gets special treatment." Mike turned his head, his patience wearing thin. "I'm not being arrogant. I just want to complete this flight without having to justify every move I make." Emma felt the pressure mounting with every passing minute. She sighed and returned to Carla. "I really think he could become a problem during the flight. It's not that he's done anything wrong, but the atmosphere around him is tense. The other passengers are clearly uncomfortable with his presence." Carla glanced at her watch and saw that the departure time was being delayed. Finally, she made a difficult decision. "If you think this could impact the flight, we'll have to ask him to leave the plane. But Emma, you need to handle this as delicately as possible." Emma returned to Mike, her expression now serious. "Mr. Carter, I'm very sorry to inform you that, for the safety and comfort of the other passengers, we cannot continue this journey with you on this flight. We'll arrange another flight for you as soon as possible." Mike stood up abruptly, his eyes locking onto Emma. "You've got to be kidding me. I haven't done anything wrong, and now you're kicking me off the plane just because a few people don't like me? Is this how you treat your passengers?" Emma felt the weight of Mike's deep, commanding voice but stood firm in her stance. "I understand how you feel, but this is the decision of the flight crew. Please gather your belongings." Mike pulled his suitcase from the overhead compartment, his movements observed by a mix of curious and shocked passengers. Some spoke up in his defense. "This is outrageous. He hasn't done anything wrong. The flight attendant is acting entirely on emotion. This is so disappointing." But the flight crew's decision remained unchanged. Mike, maintaining as much composure as he could muster, rolled his suitcase down the aisle and off the plane, feeling a mix of humiliation and anger. Seated in the airport's waiting area, Mike's mind raced with countless questions. He pulled out his phone and called his agent, Tom Hendricks. "Tom, what the hell just happened? I was kicked off the plane for no valid reason. Just because I'm a celebrity." Tom was stunned. "You got kicked off the plane? Where are you?" "Don't do anything yet. Let me handle this. I'll call the airline's management immediately." Mike hung up, still fuming. He stared out the window at the plane preparing for takeoff without him on board. The frustration was overwhelming, but deep down, Mike knew this was only the beginning of a much bigger story. Mike sat silently in the waiting area, his hands clenched tightly around the handle of his small suitcase. He wasn't someone who lost his temper easily, but the humiliation and injustice he had just experienced were more than he could bear. For the first time in his career, Mike felt that his fame wasn't a badge of honor but a burden. Less than 10 minutes after leaving the plane, Mike's phone rang. It was Tom Hendricks, his agent. Tom's voice came through, clear but filled with concern. "Mike, I've spoken with the airline's management. They're addressing this issue immediately. They can't treat you like this." Mike responded, his voice low and simmering with anger. "They kicked me off the plane, Tom. They threw me out for no valid reason. And that flight attendant? She acted purely on emotion. This isn't just a personal insult, it's an attack on my dignity." "Stay calm," Tom said, trying to soothe him. "I understand how you feel, but we need to handle this professionally. I've already reached out to James Lawson, the airline's regional director. He's heading to the airport personally to resolve this." Mike hung up, but the weight of frustration lingered. He sat up straight, his gaze fixed on the runway, where the plane he was supposed to be on was now taking off. "If they think I'm going to stay quiet, they're wrong," he thought to himself. Not long after, a sharply dressed man in a black suit briskly walked into the waiting area. He stopped in front of Mike, extending a hand with a polished smile. Mr. Carter, I'm James Lawson, the airline's regional director. I sincerely apologize for the incident that just occurred. We are investigating it and will ensure you receive the highest level of support. Mike shook his hand, his cold stare unwavering. Do you understand that I was publicly humiliated in front of hundreds of passengers for no valid reason? My reputation isn't something to be toyed with like this. James sat down across from Mike, keeping his tone calm and measured. You're absolutely right. This was a significant mistake on our part. I assure you I will personally handle this matter and issue a public apology. But for now, we've arranged an alternative flight for you so you can continue your journey without further delays. Mike was silent for a moment, then nodded. I'll board the next flight, but I want your airline to take clear responsibility not just for me, but for any other passenger who finds themselves in a situation like this. The incident didn't end at the airport. Several passengers on the flight had recorded videos of Mike being escorted off the plane and posted them on social media. The footage quickly went viral, drawing thousands of comments criticizing the airline's actions and supporting Mike. On Twitter, the hashtag #JusticeForMicah began trending within hours. Major news outlets and media platforms picked up the story, analyzing every aspect of the event. One tweet stood out: celebrities are humans too. Mike Carter did nothing wrong, yet he was kicked off a flight because of a flight attendant's emotional insecurity. It's time airlines start taking more accountability. Tom called Mike again, his voice filled with tension. Mike, this situation is turning into a media storm. Reporters are going to want your side of the story, but we need to handle this carefully. Don't let emotions take over. Mike sat quietly, absorbing the weight of Tom's words. He had never wanted to attract attention in this way, but now, the situation had spiraled far beyond his control. The airline arranged a private flight for Mike just a few hours later. While waiting, James personally escorted him to the boarding area, offering another apology. We're deeply sorry for this experience. I hope this new flight provides you with a more comfortable journey. Mike nodded, maintaining a polite demeanor, but the frustration inside him lingered. He boarded the plane, this time finding himself in a quiet cabin with no prying eyes or whispers. Settling into his seat, Mike opened his phone to find a flood of messages from teammates, friends, and fans. He let out a sigh, knowing this story wasn't going to end anytime soon. During the flight, Mike reflected on what had happened. He realized that fame didn't only bring admiration and opportunities, but also responsibilities and unexpected challenges. This incident had wounded his dignity, but also raised a bigger question about how people treat each other in sensitive situations. Mike thought to himself, I can't let this be dismissed as just an unfortunate incident. It has to serve as a lesson for both myself and them. The replacement flight ended peacefully, but for Mike, his mind was far from at rest. As he stepped off the plane in New York, he wasn't greeted by fans or teammates, but by a swarm of reporters, cameras, and microphones thrust toward him. News of his removal from the earlier flight had spread like wildfire. A reporter rushed up to him, her voice urgent. Mr. Carter, do you have any comments on the incident on the flight? Were you removed for security reasons? Mike remained calm, his piercing gaze directed into the camera. I did nothing wrong. I was just another passenger, but I was treated unfairly based on emotional judgment. I trust the truth will come to light. Mike's concise, resolute answers only fueled the media's curiosity. Articles began surfacing rapidly, with attention-grabbing headlines such as, Baseball star Mike Carter victim of airline bias. Airline faces backlash after incident with prominent athlete. When emotion overrules logic, the unusual journey of Mike Carter. At the airline's headquarters, Regional Director James Lawson was under unprecedented pressure. Phones rang incessantly, emails piled up, and the media demanded explanations. The airline's board convened an emergency meeting, requiring James to provide a full account of the situation. We're not dealing with an ordinary customer, one board member emphasized. This is a public figure. Our reputation is at stake. Immediate action is necessary. James proposed a solution. I've been in contact with Mr. Carter and assured him that we'll issue a public apology. Additionally, I suggest holding a press conference to clarify the situation. Some board members nodded in agreement, but one dissented. We need to be cautious. A public apology could set a bad precedent. The crew acted in the name of safety, even if it was based on emotion. The debate dragged on, but mounting pressure from the media and public forced the airline to act swiftly. Meanwhile, Mike's team, the Silver Strikers publicly voiced their support. The head coach held a press conference expressing disappointment with how the airline handled the situation. Mike Carter is an exemplary player both on and off the field. We hope he receives the apology he deserves. Celebrities like him shouldn't be subjected to unfair treatment just because of public scrutiny. Mike's teammates also expressed their support on social media, further fueling fans' outrage against the airline. A wave of boycotts began to form, threatening the airline's reputation. A few days later, Mike received an invitation to the airline's headquarters for a direct meeting with senior management. Accompanying him were Tom Hendricks and a legal representative. They entered a large conference room where James Lawson and several executives were waiting. James opened with a sincere apology. "Mr. Carter, first and foremost, we want to extend our deepest apologies for what happened. This was a procedural failure on our part, and we take full responsibility." Mike listened, his expression unreadable. "I appreciate your apology, but what I want is fairness. Not just for me, but for all passengers. If I weren't a public figure, would you have treated me the same way?" Mike's question brought a hush over the room. James nodded, speaking slowly. "You're right. We did not handle this appropriately. To rectify the situation, we will issue a public apology and commit to retraining our entire crew on how to handle similar situations in the future." Shortly after the meeting, the airline held a press conference where James Lawson publicly addressed the incident. "We sincerely apologize to Mr. Mike Carter and all passengers for this unfortunate event. We are committed to improving our processes to ensure that every passenger, regardless of who they are, is treated fairly and professionally." The press conference received positive feedback from the public, but for Mike, the story wasn't entirely over. He knew the incident had left a lasting impression on his career and his life. Returning home after the tumultuous days, Mike sat at his desk, opened his journal, and began to write. "Life isn't just about the games we play on the field, it's about how we handle unexpected challenges. Today I learned that fame isn't always a shield sometimes. It's the fire that fans the flames of injustice. But what matters most is staying true to yourself, even when the world around you feels chaotic." Mike Carter no longer wanted to revisit the story of the flight incident, but the aftermath clung to him like a shadow. Reports, articles, and debates on social media continued to swirl. Despite receiving a public apology from the airline, Mike understood that, in the eyes of some, he was still the troublesome celebrity, a label he never wanted to bear. One fresh morning at the Silver Strikers training field, Mike was greeted warmly by his teammates. They lined up, clapping and cheering as he walked in, their playful jabs cutting through the lingering tension. "Welcome back, Mr. Media Star Tony," the team's star pitcher laughed loudly. "Mike, you've managed to make the entire country talk about baseball without hitting a single home run." "Impressive," added Jack, the team captain, with a grin. Mike burst out laughing, patting Tony on the shoulder. "If you spent half as much time practicing as you do making jokes, maybe I wouldn't have to carry the team through the whole season." The teasing lightened Mike's mood. He knew he could always count on his team, a second family he could lean on when things got tough. In the days that followed, Mike decided to accept an invitation to appear on a major television interview. He wanted to use the opportunity to clarify the situation and deliver a meaningful message. Under the studio lights, which cast a soft glow on him, Mike sat across from Karen Harlow, a well-known journalist with a reputation for neutrality and insightful questioning. "Mike, thank you for being here today," Karen began. "First, I want to ask, how do you feel after the incident on the flight?" Mike took a deep breath, keeping his tone calm. "I feel disappointed, not just because of what happened to me, but because it highlights how we sometimes rush to judgment based on appearances or fame. I don't blame the flight crew, but I hope this story serves as a lesson for all of us to listen and understand before jumping to conclusions." Karen nodded and continued. "Do you think your fame made the situation worse?" Mike chuckled softly. "Absolutely. But fame also comes with responsibility. If my story can help people learn something, then I'm willing to endure it." The interview lasted nearly an hour, and by the end, Mike felt as if a burden had been lifted from his shoulders. The program received overwhelmingly positive feedback from viewers, and Mike's image as a patient, composed, and responsible individual was fully restored in the public's eyes. The big day finally arrived, the decisive game of the season. The Silver Strikers were up against a formidable opponent, and all eyes were on Mike. This wasn't just an opportunity for him to showcase his skills on the field, it was a chance to reaffirm that he was an athlete who couldn't be shaken by anything. The stadium was packed with fans, and every time Mike stepped up to the plate, cheers erupted, echoing throughout the stands. On his second at-bat, he delivered a perfect home run, sending the ball soaring out of the park amidst a thunderous roar of excitement. By the end of the game, his team clinched a narrow victory, and Mike emerged as the hero of the match. At the post-game press conference, he didn't speak about himself. Instead, he expressed heartfelt gratitude to his teammates, the fans, and everyone who had supported him along the way. After the game, Mike sat quietly in the locker room, staring at the championship trophy. The past few days had been a significant challenge, but they had also given him an opportunity to better understand himself and appreciate the value of those around him. He picked up his phone and saw a message from James Lawson, the regional director of the airline. "Thank you for giving us the chance to make things right. We've learned a lot from you. Congratulations on your win today." Mike smiled and typed back, "No problem, James. Sometimes people need to stumble to learn how to stand tall. Best of luck to you all." As Mike stepped out of the stadium, he looked up at the star-filled sky. A chapter of his life had closed, but he knew the journey ahead was still long, filled with more games, challenges, and lessons waiting to be discovered. A few weeks after his decisive victory, Mike Carter's life seemed to have returned to its usual rhythm. However, the incident on the plane had left a deep impression on him, not just because of the humiliation, but also because of the profound lesson it had taught him about the power of empathy and how individuals can impact one another. One morning, while practicing on the field with his team, Mike received a call from his agent, Tom Hendricks. "Mike, I just got a very special invitation," Tom said, his tone excited. "A nonprofit organization wants you to join a campaign to raise awareness about fair treatment in public spaces. They believe your story is a powerful source of inspiration." Mike gripped the phone tightly, pausing to think. "What kind of campaign? Are they asking me to talk about the flight incident?" "Not just that," Tom explained. "They want you to be a representative, to share your personal experience and encourage people to think before acting on emotion. This is a chance to turn your experience into something positive." Mike was silent for a moment before responding, "All right, if it can help others, I'm willing to do it." A few weeks later, Mike stood on the stage of a large auditorium, the venue for the campaign's official launch. Below him sat hundreds of attendees, including business leaders, airline employees, and fans. Under the bright stage lights, Mike began his speech. "Thank you all for being here today. I'm not a professional speaker, but I want to share my story in the hope that it might help us understand one another better." He took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping across the audience. "Not long ago, I was removed from a flight simply because some people thought I might cause trouble. It wasn't because of anything I did, but because my presence made some people feel uneasy. At the time, I was angry and felt it was unfair. But looking back, I realized that we're often led by our emotions, and sometimes that leads to poor decisions." The audience fell silent, fully engrossed in his words. "The important thing," Mike continued, "is that we learn to listen and understand each other, rather than relying solely on first impressions. Whether on a flight, a baseball field, or anywhere else, empathy is always the bridge that connects people." Mike's speech was met with thunderous applause. His heartfelt words and real-life experiences resonated deeply with many in the audience. At the same time, the airline involved in the incident launched a new training program for all employees, particularly the flight crew. In a statement published by the media, James Lawson, the regional director, said, "We've learned an important lesson from this incident. Not only have we apologized to Mr. Mike Carter, but we are also committed to improving our processes to ensure that every passenger is treated fairly and professionally." The airline also invited Mike to become an honorary advisor for their training program. Initially, Mike declined, but he later agreed to participate in a few sessions as a guest speaker, sharing his story and encouraging employees to act with understanding rather than emotion. The success of the campaign not only helped Mike restore his reputation, but also opened a new chapter in his life. He received numerous invitations to participate in social events and became an ambassador for meaningful campaigns. These opportunities not only allowed him to grow personally, but also gave him the chance to inspire others. One day, during a talk at a university, a young student asked him, "Do you think the incident on the plane was a blessing in disguise?" Mike smiled, pausing to reflect before responding, I wouldn't call it a blessing. But I do believe that how we respond to adversity is what truly matters. I chose to turn that experience into a lesson for myself and others. And that made it all worthwhile. One late afternoon, Mike sat on the balcony of his home, watching the sun set. His familiar journal lay open on the table, filled with fresh entries. Life isn't always smooth. But every challenge is an opportunity to learn, grow, and make the world a better place, even with just one small action. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and felt a sense of peace. In his mind, he knew that his journey wasn't just about hitting home runs on the field, but also about touching the hearts of others. Life constantly presents us with unexpected challenges, and how we respond to them is what defines who we truly are. Mike Carter's story is not just about overcoming adversity, but also a reminder that each of us has the power to turn difficulties into opportunities for growth. Live with empathy, act with responsibility, and remember that sometimes even a small challenge can open the door to a brighter future. If you found this story meaningful, please hit like, share this video, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more inspiring content. Don't forget to turn on notifications to join us in exploring more thought-provoking stories in life. Thank you for being with us.